What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It's Tuesday, December 26, 2017. It's Boxing Day. Last week of the month, last week of the year, and obviously this is the week where everybody sits and does a look back over the year at things good and things bad, and did the year meet our expectations? And so if you have an opinion on that, the phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Claire and I are still dealing with this flu. Now, I'm almost over it. I'm almost back to my normal, cantankerous, obnoxious, annoying self. Claire is still, unfortunately, struggling with it. She had hoped to spend a few of the third hours this week with our show, but I'm insisting that she rest and relax because she needs to get better. And I'm just trying to take care of her as well as I can. Anyway, on December 28th, Donald Jeffries is going to be with us talking about his book, Survival of the Richest. He was scheduled for last week, but because of the flu problem, we had to reschedule. And it's been a crazy Christmas for a lot of people. The sudden onset of these major winter storms has snarled the post-Christmas travel to a huge degree, something like more than 3,000 flights delayed, more than 50 canceled outright. The airports are an absolute mess. There's been one case of an aircraft literally sliding on the snow on the runway, but nobody was hurt, and so it turned out very well, but I'm sure it was a bit of a scare for the people on board the aircraft. Now, speaking of the aircraft, big stink coming on up, and according to this report, there was this teacher who had bought herself a first-class seat on this flight from Houston to Washington, D.C. on United Airlines, Flight 788. And this teacher gets to the gate, and she's told her reservation has mysteriously vanished, but they're going to give her a $500 voucher and one of the cheap seats on the flight. And this teacher's getting on board the plane and notices that sitting in the first-class seat that she had bought and paid for was Representative Sheila Jackson Lee. So all of a sudden she's wondering if she's been kicked out of her first-class seat to make way for Sheila Jackson Lee. And she tried to take a picture. She did succeed in taking a picture, at which point the flight crew just went totally ballistic and saying, no, you can't do that. Just take the seat we gave you or we're going to give you all kinds of trouble. So, political pull, I guess, here. I mean, travel is enough already without pulling that kind of stunt here. Over in Pennsylvania, apparently there was this family living under a homeowners association, which my experience has been that's where all the Nazi war criminals are hiding out. They're now homeowners association presidents. And apparently they had a Christmas display in front of their home which included the word Jesus. Christmas, after all, being the celebration of his birthday, even though the historical Jesus was actually born in spring. And apparently one of the neighbors complained, and on the basis of that one complaint, the family was ordered to take down their display because it's offensive. Now, isn't it kind of weird that we are being told constantly, just be open and accepting of other people's religions, whether it's Judaism or Islam, and yet Christianity doesn't get that same courtesy? And it's another example of the double standards and hypocrisy that we're seeing from this New World Order, blur them all together effort. And I think everybody has a right to celebrate whatever their religious beliefs are and to put up whatever decorations they want. And I think anybody who lacks the sense of respect to say, live and let live. They're going to have Jesus, we're going to have a menorah, over here they're going to have whatever this other religion has. Just leave them alone. We have way too many people walking around this world whose entire sense of self-worth is always finding things to be offended by. Now, speaking of offensive, apparently Newsweek ran an article. This is the headline verbatim. Trump and the Nazis stole Christmas. And the author of this article, Christina Mazza, is not an op-ed contributor. She's a staff writer. She works for Newsweek to cover religion and extremism. And she writes in the article that critics say President Donald Trump's crusade to reintroduce Merry Christmas over the more neutral Happy Holidays as the standard Christmas greeting is part of a larger attempt by the president to define America as a country for white Christians alone. Well, first of all, it is Christmas, and Merry Christmas is a perfectly appropriate greeting. And as a matter of fact, for much of the history of the United States of America, this has been predominantly a white Christian nation. And they have every right to hang on to their traditions and use them without being harassed about it. So this Newsweek writer, Christina Maza, just agrees with the critics without any real evidence, logic, or justification. And again, way too many people walking around here just looking for things to be offended about. We're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Before we get into some of the news here, I want to share with you, I got a lot of email over this last weekend expressing concern for Claire and my health, and wishing us get well, and Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays, and thank you for all of that well wishes and concern. But I did get an interesting email asking why we're always talking about such negative things and why can't we make the show happier and have lots of fun things in there. And my reply was simply, these are negative times. And the corporate media likes to fill up their broadcast time, their column inches, with fluffy things, last-second Christmas gifts. And even now today, they're going on and on about what a wonderful holiday shopping season this was. And apparently the numbers actually were up this year. The bad news is most of that was on credit. But getting on back to the idea of making the show fun, I'd like to do it. But the reality is, the reason I'm doing the show, the reason I'm doing the website, the reason you're here listening, is we understand these are very dark times for our nation. I'm 65 years old. I have never seen this country in such bad shape during my entire lifespan. And we have to acknowledge that if we're ever going to do anything about it. It goes back to that wonderful speech by the Will McAvoy character in HBO's The Newsroom, where he's explaining how we're not the greatest country on earth anymore. And he ends up saying the first step to dealing with a problem is recognizing one exists, and that's what we're doing. Every once in a while, we'll throw something light and funny in there, but the purpose of this program is education. And I need you to help spread that education to other people. There are bad things going on in our government. There are bad things going on in our corporate media. There are bad things going on in the pharmaceutical industry. And we need to deal with that, because the government that we thought was looking out for our best interests has clearly abandoned that role. And we have dangerous food additives in our supermarket food. We have vaccines that don't work and cause harm. We have products that are deliberately designed to fail, to get you to buy another one over and over and over again. This is not what I would consider to be a mature society. Now, getting on to the domestic news. Apparently, the FBI found 2,800 government documents on Anthony Weiner's laptop. And Judicial Watch has gotten them through the courts. And this coming Friday, December 29th, they're going to start dumping them. And Tom Fitton is saying that, as near as they can tell, they do include classified information. And that is a clear Title 18 violation. So we'll see what's going to happen on that. Judicial Watch has just been doing amazing work through the years. Now, apparently, Representative Matt Gaetz, Republican of Florida, has revealed there is evidence that the upper echelons of the FBI planned and then gave Hillary Clinton special treatment to protect her from her email server scandal. So here we had the FBI, which we're all taught in TV shows and movies are out there to get the criminals and out there to see that the laws are complied with. Here we have the FBI conspiring to obstruct justice. And if I am correct about what that server was really all about, then we have the upper officials of the FBI as accessories to espionage. So apparently Representative Gates was on Fox News Network's America's Newsroom, and he said that a congressional committee currently has email evidence that Clinton supporter and FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe had indicated that Clinton was going to get what was called an HQ special, which apparently meant she was going to receive special treatment in an investigation that was actually carried out by agents who supported her for president. And Gates also noted that there's an extreme pro-Hillary Clinton bias running through the agency, which benefited Hillary Clinton greatly. Now, the FBI is not supposed to be partisan, and their explanation is, well, we're all allowed to have political opinions. Yes, you are. Everyone has a political opinion. But when you are engaged in your official duties at the FBI or any other government agency, you leave the political bias at home and you do your job properly. There is no excuse for allowing your personal political views to influence your decision-making in whatever endeavor you're engaged in. Politics, media, movie-making, baking, you leave it at home. Now, Representative Devin Nunes is plotting or preparing an extensive corruption report on the FBI, and apparently is saying there are, in fact, talks ongoing to build criminal cases against senior officials of the FBI. And all I can say to the good representative is you keep your Kevlar undies on and stay out of small aircraft and suburban Washington, D.C. parks, if you could actually find one under the storms they're dealing with right now. Meanwhile, Congressman DeSantis is still angry. He's threatening the FBI with subpoenas and contempt charges. Meanwhile, Steve Bannon has been asked to testify before the House Intelligence Committee in January. This was in the form of a letter of request. It's not a subpoena, and so he will be allowed to testify behind closed doors. And apparently, Corey Lewandowski has also received a letter saying that they want to talk to the committee. Now, meanwhile, the Democrats are out there saying that all of this grandstanding by the Republicans has got nothing to do with the FBI's misbehavior. It's an attempt to discredit Mueller's investigation into the collusion between Donald Trump and Russia during last year's elections, of which Mueller has found zero evidence. But that's their defense. They're only looking at our bad behavior because they don't want our bad behavior to keep pushing this Russia phobia, Russia gate. Federal prosecutors are apparently after bank records related to Jared Kushner's family real estate business from Deutsche Bank. And apparently the Times reported that the U.S. Attorney's Office in Brooklyn has subpoenaed record from the German bank. Exactly why is not exactly clear. But apparently what has gotten investigators curious, Deutsche Bank has lent hundreds of millions of dollars to Kushner companies, which is reportedly facing funding difficulties due to the 2006 purchase of 666 Fifth Avenue in Manhattan. That purchase, made at the height of the real estate bubble, has backfired, and they lost a huge fortune on that. And so now there's an obvious question. Is whoever is offering to provide funding to the Kushner companies gaining access, special access to Jared Kushner himself? And that's a legitimate question. Meanwhile, the Democrats are still out there trying to push this Russiagate myth. And basically, the storyline is so inflammatory, and yet there's nothing to back it up. They're almost approaching this the way the militant feminists approach rape, that the accusation is so serious that even innocence should not be allowed as a defense. And that seems to be the way they're going here. The charge of collusion between Trump and Russia is so horrible. We can't even entertain the possibility that he might not have actually done it. Let's just move forward and get Trump, get Trump. Meanwhile, pardon me, Mary Jacoby is the wife of Fusion GPS founder Glenn Simpson. He's the guy right in the middle of this whole Russiagate, Russia dossier scandal. And apparently his wife went out on social media boasting about how Russiagate would not exist if it weren't for her husband. That was a very reckless thing to put on out there. Meanwhile, as more and more attention focuses on these top FBI officials and how they were apparently covering up for Hillary Clinton's use of that private email server and the possible espionage related to it, we get word that FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe is going to retire. He's decided he's had enough of the FBI and is going to retire early next year once he becomes fully eligible for pension benefits. So, nice job. He's going to retire at 49 and leave behind a huge mess for everybody else to try and deal with. A spokesman for McCabe and a spokesman for the FBI declined to comment on the story. And the marketing of Hillary Clinton is continuing to go on. You're going to love this one. As you know, Hillary really thought she was going to steal that White House last year. And even though she has officially said she's not running for office again, she's still out there trying to stay in the public eye. Maybe she's just addicted to the attention, or maybe she's thinking about another run in 2020. But the marketing of Hillary is continuing. And apparently there were these people who went to what they thought was going to be Hillary's victory party, and of course it didn't happen. So apparently one of the people there managed to grab hold of 200 pounds of Clinton confetti that was there to be thrown in the air, and they've encased it in glass snow globes with a metal placard inside that reads, "And Still I Rise," a reference to a Maya Angelou poem of the same name. Now, we've all seen snow globes. Probably we got a bunch of them yesterday. But these are snow globes with the colored confetti inside that you can swirl around and imagine that Hillary had actually won. And they're selling these. They made about 1,000 of these special Hillary Clinton confetti snow globes. And they're selling them, and all the proceeds are going to go to Planned Parenthood. Somehow, I don't think it's going to be a huge success. People don't like to be reminded of failure. All right, so let's get into the war zones. There's a lot going on and a lot of intense fighting in Syria. And the Syrian Arab Army achieved another strategic victory in the countryside near Damascus. Units of the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, which used to be known as Jabhat al-Nusra, they keep changing names all the time. This is the Syrian branch of al-Qaeda, and other armed groups operating in the Beat Jin pocket reportedly accepted a withdrawal agreement and declared their readiness to surrender their positions to the Syrian Arab Army. In other words, these armed U.S.-backed rebels have said, we're quitting. We're going to leave. We're just going to go away. And they're still having some negotiations about safe routes of passage. But apparently, with the implementation of this surrender agreement, the Syrian military will eliminate one of the few remaining militant-held pockets in the Damascus countryside and secure this important area near the Golan Heights. That, in turn, is going to make Israel very, very nervous. And apparently the Syrian Arab Army, backed by Iranian-backed militias, including Hezbollah, pushed deeper into a key strategic border area with Israel and Lebanon. That happened yesterday. This is going to make Israel very upset because they were hoping they were going to come out of this mess as owners of the Golan Heights. They're already selling off the oil and gas. We'll be right back after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And once more, for those of you who want to help support Republic Broadcasting, keep our mission going forward, the postal address for a donation by check or money order is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. And if you want to phone on in and become a repeating subscriber, the number is 800-724-2719, extension 03. And those of you watching on BAM User will probably notice I'm closing the windows. We're under tremendous rain right now. It's why the rest of the room is so dark. And we've got thunderstorms coming on in. So hopefully we won't get knocked off the air. But, of course, as nasty as it is here, it's a lot worse on the mainland. We'll be talking about that a little bit later in the show. Meanwhile, getting on back to the Syrian theater of war, there's been a huge violation of the ceasefire. Apparently, a Syrian military aircraft near the city of Ham was shot down, and the pilot was killed. Now, nobody actually knows who did it. None of the militant groups have stood up and said, yeah, we did it. But it is a major violation of the ceasefire. So, somebody's trying to keep this war going. And we know who that is anyway. Russia expressed concern over this action because Russia is in the process of bringing in humanitarian aid to Syria's Deir ez-Zor. And they just delivered over 12 tons of food into that part of Syria. Now, Putin has basically come on out and said that Russia's work in Syria is not done yet. And what he is basically saying is that he sees that if Russia were to leave Syria, that the U.S. is going to come back and try to take Syria over yet again. So Russia is going to maintain a permanent presence there, as well as they're going to be heavily involved in the rebuilding after the war, which is another defeat for the United States, because when the United States goes into a country like Iraq or Afghanistan or Libya or Syria and they smash up the place, generally it's American companies who get all that money to rebuild after it's all over. And now that's going to be going toward Russia. And Russia is apparently forming permanent force groupings at Syria's Tartus and Hmeymim, H-M-E-Y-M-I-M. Not sure how to pronounce that. So Russia is not going away. I think anybody looking at this from a military point of view, from a geopolitical point of view, understands the United States just lost this. And they can put whatever spin on it they want. Well, we got ISIS and Al-Qaeda. We got this. We got those gosh darn chemical weapons. No, this was a defeat when you look at it from the context of that plan to conquer, regime change the entire oil-producing Middle East that was whistleblown by General Wesley Clark all those years ago. Syria was on that list. And the U.S. has stumbled badly there. Meanwhile, over in Turkey, a lot of interesting things going on over there. Apparently, Erdogan has signed a decree granting immunity for any militias that are suppressing terror. In other words, militia vigilantism in Turkey. If somebody is getting ready to commit an act of terror and you take them out, you will not get in trouble. And it may be an indicator of just how bad things are in Turkey. Or Erdogan may be following President Duterte's model for how to deal with the drug problem down in the Philippines. Just post bounties and let people go on out and deal with the problems themselves. Meanwhile, Erdogan is also very upset over the birth rate decline in Turkey, and he's actually out there encouraging women to have at least 3 children to try and rebuild their population. That, I think, is a little intrusive. But then I also think it's very intrusive when you have people running around saying you shouldn't have more than 1 baby. At some point, there has to be a line drawn between what are the rights of the individual and the authority of the government. And unfortunately, in this country, the rights of the individual are just being eroded away, scrubbed away. They got out the Brillo pad and they're just wiping them away here. Now, according to Izvestia, the U.S. State Department has indicated they are not planning to resume cooperation with Russia on Afghanistan, probably because when they cooperated with Russia in Syria, it didn't work out as well as the United States thought it was going to. So we could be at odds with Russia in Afghanistan again. Boy, didn't we just have a fight with the Russians over there in Afghanistan, Charlie Wilson's war? It would be nice if there was a rule. Once you've had a war and it's over and done with, you don't go back and repeat that war over and over and over again. We'll be right back after these commercials. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Now, turning on over to Saudi Arabia, they're beginning to engage in some very tough talk regarding Iran. And Saudi Arabia has announced that if Iran develops nuclear weapons, Saudi Arabia will have no choice but to develop nuclear weapons as well. And again, we've had a lot of countries, the United States, especially Israel, screaming that Iran was just weeks away from a nuclear bomb, and they've been saying that for the last 30 years, and it hasn't happened yet. Although in the current climate of the U.S. invading anybody who doesn't have nuclear weapons, I would certainly understand why Iran would want them, and why North Korea wants them. But so Saudi Arabia is threatening that they will start building nukes if Iran gets nuclear weapons. Now, I really don't have a problem with that, and I'll tell you why. When you have a world where only a few nations have nuclear weapons, the rest of the world are their prey. The U.S. has demonstrated that repeatedly over the last 16 going on 17 years. I know we would all like a world in which there were no nuclear weapons at all. That will never happen. So the next best thing is every nation has a nuclear deterrent. And there will be peace. Because the cost of invading a neighboring country will so far outweigh any potential gain, it's just not worth doing it. All of this talk about Iran disarming and North Korea disarming and the rest of it is to make the cost of invading these countries as low as possible to maximize the profitability of the war. But the nuclear genie is out of the bottle. There is no putting it back. And I think Iran should have nuclear weapons. That'll give other countries a good reason to leave them alone. I think Saudi Arabia ought to have nuclear weapons because sooner or later they're going to be on the U.S. government's to-be regime changed list. I think if everybody has nuclear bombs, nobody will use them. That was certainly the theory that was being promoted back when I was young, mutually assured destruction. It was okay for the Soviet Union to have nuclear weapons, and we had nuclear weapons. And the fact that we both had them meant none would ever be used. Came dangerously close during the Cuban Missile Crisis. But when you have an aggressor, belligerent nation like the United States with a huge nuclear arsenal that has gone after other countries to get them to disarm, followed by invasion or regime change, you know there's a problem there. Now, speaking of Saudi Arabia, apparently Yemen has turned into Saudi Arabia's equivalent of Vietnam. It's dragging on and on and on. It's not producing the results Riyadh intended. The armed resistance, meaning the people of Yemen, are refusing to submit. And global anger over what the United Nations has already declared the world's worst humanitarian crisis is growing. And to give you the backstory on this, what went on is some years back, the U.S. had what they called a successful intervention in Yemen. They kicked out the Yemenites' own government, and they installed a puppet regime. And the people of Yemen don't like living under foreign puppet rule. No people anywhere on earth thinks it's a good idea to live under foreign puppet rule. So the people of Yemen kicked out their puppet rulers. And so the U.S., using Saudi Arabia as a proxy, has gone on back in to slap them down and say, once you're part of the American imperial empire, Yeah, you learn to love it. You just accept it. There is no breaking free. But it's not going as planned. Now, as you know, yesterday was Christmas, and again, people are dealing with the aftermath, Boxing Day and so forth. But apparently a lot of people used the Christmas holiday to make some political points. And the Archbishop of Canterbury gave a speech speaking out against tyrannical and populist world leaders. And it was interpreted by many as a rebuke against U.S. President Donald Trump, or for that matter, any other world leader who was not on board with a global government. So the Archbishop, Justin Welby, was preaching at Canterbury Cathedral at the same time that Pope Francis was making oblique criticisms of Trump in his traditional Christmas address in St. Peter's Square in Vatican City. And by the way, remember all the corporate media weeks ago were saying, ISIS and Al-Qaeda, they're going to attack the Vatican on Christmas Day, it'll be horrible. Didn't happen. Did not happen. So, now, Donald Trump is still reeling from the political defeat over at the United Nations. Now, the General Assembly resolution condemning Trump for naming or for recognizing Jerusalem as Israel's capital, it's not binding. Only the Security Council resolutions are binding and can be backed up if necessary with military force. But it was a stunning political defeat. And so Nikki Haley's out there declaring the United Nations is irrelevant. And for anybody who's a historian of the Organization of American States and how they fell apart, opening the door to a world war, you begin to recognize the symptoms. The organization everybody's supposed to be a part of to prevent a world war is now all of a sudden irrelevant. And Donald Trump announced that the United States government will be cutting back their donations to the United Nations by $285 million. That's going to teach them. And yes, it is a lot of money. But to put it in perspective, the U.S. government has been funding the United Nations to the tune of roughly $8 billion, with a B, every year. That's almost a quarter of the entire UN budget. And apparently Donald Trump thought that since the U.S. was paying that big a portion of the UN's budget, that the UN would just go along with the United States and Israel's agenda. And it did not happen. And it's rather interesting to see this thuggish behavior continuing on the part of our ambassador to the United Nations. Nikki Haley's out there saying, we're going to take names. We're taking names of everybody who refused to support us. So there will be consequences. And I don't think Nikki understands that all of this is diminishing respect for the United States around the world. The rest of the world fears our military. They fear our weapons of mass destruction, but they don't respect us. And fear is a very poor substitute for respect. Meanwhile, apparently, the protests over in Gaza are continuing. 2 more Palestinians were killed on Friday. And apparently, the Israeli forces are assaulting journalists and medics as well. The journalists are there trying to cover what's going on. And the medics are there to treat the wounded, and they too are being assaulted by the IDF forces. The Red Crescent Society stated that nearly 700 Palestinians have been injured by Israeli forces during protests in the occupied West Bank and Gaza Strip. 65 by live fire, more than 100 with rubber-coated bullets, and nearly 450 by gas. Now, interestingly enough, the former chief of the Mossad, Tamir Pardo, normally he keeps a low profile, but he came on out with a public appearance and he said, Iran is not the greatest threat to Israel. And he's certainly right about that. Iran has not initiated a war of conquest against another country in 200 years. And certainly not since the 1979 Iranian Revolution, which kicked out their U.S. puppet ruler, the Shah. But basically, former Mossad chief Tamir Pardo is saying the greatest threat to Israel right now is the growing discord over the illegal occupation and the refusal to try to come to some kind of a peaceful solution with the Palestinian people. And he's saying it could lead to outright civil war. And that could drag in other Arab countries on the side of the Palestinians. Now, Iran's parliament speaker, Ali Larijani, basically said that Trump's gambling with his Jerusalem decision, and it could lead to regional war. And I'm sure there's probably a lot of people inside the United States, in particular those who are pro-Israel, who would love to see a regional war. Let's just go on in and get rid of all those Arabs once and for all and, let Israel run the place and all will be well. Meanwhile, and I hope Donald Trump is paying attention to this for 2018 and 2020, polls are showing that less than half of Americans are supporting his decision to recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital. And you need to remember that the United Nations, basically at the partition plan, they said Jerusalem is a shared city. It has to be shared amongst all these religions and all these political people. It is not the capital of Israel. And they have repeated that resolution multiple times. And Israel just ignores them, knowing that the United States will always exercise their veto at the Security Council. So Israel's basically a rogue nation, aided and abetted by another rogue nation, the United States of America. They're ignoring international law, they're ignoring existing treaties, they're ignoring the United Nations Charter. Israel's just out there acting like a spoiled child. We want this, we want that, and if you don't give it to us, then you're a dirty, filthy, anti-Semite Jew hater who wants Hitler to come back and gas the Jewish babies in the ovens. Now, Israel is claiming that they are now in contact with 10 countries over the possibility of them also moving their embassies to Jerusalem. Now, probably some of these little tiny countries like Micronesia and the Republic of Palau, who are totally dependent on U.S. foreign aid to exist, they'll probably go ahead and do it. How many more will? We don't know. Meanwhile, Pope Francis reiterated a call for a two-state solution, which I think would be an excellent idea. I think any rational human being is going to say, you've got the Israelis and you've got the Palestinians. Just draw a border. But Israel, to this very day, since the day it was carved out of Palestine, Israel refuses to draw an official border. Palestine's willing to share. They've said that many times. And Israel's attitude is, no, we want it all. And we want you to recognize our right to exist before we talk about anything else. And see, there's the trap. Because Israel has never drawn their official borders, nobody knows what they're recognizing, what they agree to. Palestine could say, all right, we recognize Israel's right to exist, and Israel could say, well, our border is reaching way around over the West Bank and Gaza and Palestine. That's now all Israel. You just recognize its right to exist, and you all have to leave. Now, getting up into Europe, apparently Lithuania is now thinking or rethinking their alliance in the global geopolitical game. And they're thinking that it might be better for them to cooperate with Russia and basically pivot away. And saying that they're having to evaluate what's happening in Europe, how the member states of the European Union are being treated by Brussels, how much of the rest of the world is being treated by the United States, and they're thinking, Lithuania, Russia, looking really good. So, again, in the context of global geopolitics, the U.S. is already losing. This plan to bring the entire world under a global government based on something Western. It's not working. Meanwhile, Vladimir Putin wants harsher laws on non-governmental organizations acting as foreign agents inside Russia. And basically, he says we need to exclude all interference in our domestic political life from outside directly or through third parties by financing their activities within the country. Now, Russia's already banned non-governmental organizations that are known to be working to subvert Russia or part of Soros' global government. But he wants tougher laws. And it would sure be nice if we had laws like that in the United States, because we have all kinds of foreign-funded organizations in our country subverting our nation. Now, last week, Putin came on out with a statement that the biggest crisis Russia was facing right now was not U.S. militarism or not economic upheaval, but internal corruption. And apparently that was a prelude to the announcement that in Russia's Ministry of Defense, 30 officials have been convicted for embezzlement. And they're saying that basically all the state-owned property has now been returned, and these officials are going to be punished. So Putin is cracking down on corruption, which is why I wish he would run for president of the United States in 2020. Donald Trump said he was going to crack down on the corruption. I haven't seen it yet. I really haven't. And in this final week of 2017, and we look back over the last year, I have to say Donald Trump has been very, very disappointing. He's done a few things. He's made some token gestures to dealing with immigration, except the courts keep blocking him on that. But we're still hovering at the edge of a global war. The economy is still trembling at the edge of collapse. The jobs really aren't coming back, other than in token amounts. Oh, we created 1,000 jobs. Huzzah, huzzah. Am I not great? No. Not when you've got almost 100 million Americans who have not been able to find work for months, if not years. Now, tensions are apparently rising between China and Taiwan. And apparently, Liu Junchuan, the head of the Liaison Office of China's Policymaking Taiwan Affairs Office, declared that Beijing favors one country, two systems approach to reunification. And they're saying they're trying to make it attractive for Taiwan to merge with China, allow them a certain degree of autonomy. But they're dropping hints about an overwhelming strategic advantage. And Taiwan is now concerned that there might actually be an invasion. We're going to take another break for commercials. Join us on the air, 800-313-9443, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking about what's going on over in North Korea. And as you know, the United Nations voted through additional sanctions against North Korea, including substantial limitations on refined oil products like diesel fuel, and an order for all North Koreans working outside the country to return to North Korea within the next 24 months. And the sanctions had a huge amount of support, but there's a problem. And it's a problem actually with all of these sanctions. They cause much more harm to the civilians of a country than to the government. Because if you start cutting off fuel supplies, the government will basically grab what they need for their military and for their operations, and civilian use is going to be considered non-essential, and they'll just have to deal with the hardship. And that's been a long-standing problem all along with sanctions. They don't actually affect the government, they affect the people. People who may not agree with the policies of their government, such as is the case in so many other countries, like here in the United States. All right, let's grab ourselves a phone call. Ron in Missouri, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Merry Christmas. I listen to the mainstream media for one purpose. Whatever they say, I believe the opposite. When they claim that consumers spent $800 billion this year, and credit or no credit, I don't buy it. Follow up with because of high-wage jobs, low unemployment, and better economics. I don't buy it for one bit.
Well, I've heard several different numbers for this Christmas shopping season, but we're in the week of the after-Christmas sales. And so this may just be more propaganda to say people, well, you know, there's still time to get on out there and get in on this wonderful holiday shopping season. But just to judge anecdotally from what Claire and I saw, and we did very little shopping. We got it out of the way early. But just driving by the local mall, looking at the number of empty parking spaces in the parking lot, I don't think they had a very good Christmas here at all. And what we'll do is when we get the next quarterly reports from the retailers, those will be the real numbers that we can look at and determine whether this was a good Christmas shopping season or not. One thing I'll tell you is that even the corporate media is admitting the vast majority of the spending was all done on credit cards. And so it's just piled up more debt on these poor people who are going to be spending the rest of the year trying to pay it all back. After being whipped into this buying frenzy. There's something that I use which I call the trash bin index, and that is the morning, after Christmas, how full is the trash bin? How much wrapping paper and boxes and everything is there? And I remember when I was a kid, I mean, it was huge, overflowing. This year's trash bin, no, there just really wasn't all that much. And we've got a lot of kids who live in this courtyard area. So I don't buy that number either.
Yeah, I don't believe people go in debt for that either.
Yeah, I'm not trusting that number. All right, listen, Ron, got to let you go. Got to take a station break here, top of the hour. We'll be right back after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Getting on back to Korea, North Korea has basically issued a statement saying that the U.S. needs to lay off if it wants to live safely, and that it is a pipe dream for the United States to believe North Korea would ever give up its nuclear weapons. And again, the United States only has itself to blame for this intransigence, because the U.S. has gone to other countries like Libya, Syria, Iraq, and said, if you give up these weapons of mass destruction, we will leave you alone. And these countries gave up their weapons of mass destruction only to be invaded by the United States. Now, with a pattern like that, I can understand North Korea's hardline position here. If we give up our weapons of deterrence, there'll be no deterrent to the United States coming on in and invading us. And a lot of people living in North Korea remember how badly they suffered at the hands of the United States at the start of the Korean War, which technically, officially is still on. Now, Moscow is out there saying they're ready to act as a mediator between the United States and North Korea. This is Putin playing the global statesman again. And unfortunately for Putin, it's a good idea, it's a generous offer, it's a non-starter, because the United States does not see itself as a participant in a discussion, but always being in charge of the talks. And so they're not going to go for that. But critics are basically saying that if the United States is serious about wanting to actually have talks with North Korea, the very best way they could start was with an apology for the use of biological and chemical weapons during the start of the Korean War. Now, the U.S. officially denies doing any such thing, but there's a tremendous body of evidence that, in point of fact, yes, the United States was using chemical and biological weapons on the civilians of North Korea. And North Korea is certainly convinced about it. So if the U.S. is serious about talks, then acknowledging that and saying, we goofed, we messed up, because it certainly didn't win the war for them, did it? That might be a big start. All right, let's talk about the economic news here a little bit. And I do find myself in agreement with that caller. I'm not trusting all these glowing numbers that the retailers are supposed to have done over the holiday shopping season. And when we get the earnings reports from the retailers at the first quarter of 2018, those are going to be the numbers we're going to look at. because, again, it's Boxing Day. The post-Christmas sales are going to go on for another week. And what's corporate media going to be doing? Convincing everybody that it's wonderful. You can still get great deals. There are things to buy, and you don't want to be left behind. All your friends and neighbors just maxed out that plastic. And, boy, there's something wrong with you if you don't do the same. Apparently, 41 million people are living in poverty this holiday season. 9 million of them do not receive any income from anyone at all. And once you've been unemployed for long enough, you don't qualify for unemployment payments anymore. And once you're on the street, there is nowhere for other programs to send a check to. It's this little trap door at the bottom of our economy. If you fall on out, the spring slaps it shut and there's no way back up. Somebody ought to work on that. Claire and I learned when we were involved with the food program over at this other church over here, not everybody who's living on the streets deserves to be there or did something where that's their punishment. We saw young people, people with skills, people who got lured here with promises of work that evaporated, and they didn't have enough money to leave. We call them Hawaiian sourdoughs. Sour on Hawaii, don't have the dough to leave. There needs to be a mechanism to reintegrate them into our society. They put one together for the illegal immigrants and the refugees to get them reintegrated. But how about homeless Americans? Why does nobody care about them? That's a question that needs to be asked. Right now, New York City is going through the most homelessness since the Depression of the 1930s. Homelessness in Los Angeles is at all-time record highs. Don't tell me that this economy is working. It's working for the people at the very top, and that's the way they like it. Something else I noticed about Christmas gift giving this year, a lot more homemade food items were being given as gifts. A lot less store-bought stuff, more food items. Now, according to CCN, a high-ranking European Union official has dismissed any suggestions that the EU will regulate Bitcoin markets and exchanges. And basically, the EU's view of the cryptocurrency, they don't view it as an alternative currency. And people can buy and sell them, but there's not going to be any regulation whatsoever. The EU only recognizes the euro as a legitimate medium of exchange, which I don't think is going to change people's enthusiasm for Bitcoin, which, by the way, is on its way back up after that dip on Friday. Japan is taking a little more serious look at what's going on, and apparently Japan's largest bank is preparing a contingency plan for a potential Bitcoin exchange collapse. And this is all going back to February 2014, when Tokyo-based Bitcoin exchange Mt. Gox, for more than 24,000 investors around the world, had some major problems. And it triggered a 2-year crypto bear market that saw the price of a single Bitcoin plunge from a peak of $1,200 to a low of $200 before the current bull market really took off. Well, they don't want to go through that again. And there are reasons to be cautious about Bitcoin because it is no more real a currency than the Federal Reserve note. There's no commodity base supporting it. And unfortunately, with all these malware, computer malware that is hijacking machines as Bitcoin miners, we're actually looking at an inflationary bubble in the supply of Bitcoins. They're being created so fast by all these hijacked machines. And that's making it unstable. There's no real stabilization mechanism. Bitcoin mining was supposed to be, we were told it was going to be controlling the number of Bitcoins in circulation. But with all of these websites and malware that are out there literally hijacking millions, hundreds of millions of computers around the world as Bitcoin miners, that control has broken down, and it's another reason to be very, very, very concerned. Now, getting on over to the Eurozone, they had their Christmas message, and they had this sort of a post was a picture of the EU flag flanked by blue and gold baubles and tinsels, and the message was Merry Christmas and warm holiday wishes. And apparently this triggered a Twitter firestorm, chastising them for their failures on the continent. You can put all the decorations you want on it. The European Union is not working for the nations of Europe or for the European people. And a lot of people were very critical for Brussels for not reining in Spain when Spain was arresting the people behind the Catalan independence movement. Now, apparently, Tony Blair is still out there trying to tour around, trying to be a global statesman, trying to be a successful former prime minister. But apparently, people are getting tired of him. And apparently, Mr. Blair is just out there, and people are just saying, nobody wants to see or hear Tony Blair again. And a big part of that might be the fact of his lies in support of the war in Iraq, the dodgy dossier, the Downing Street memo. That's why we called him Phony Tony. He was as big a liar getting the war in Iraq started as George W. Bush was. So why would anybody want to listen to somebody once you know they're liars? And worse, they lie their countries into wars of conquest. In my view, that is the highest of high crimes and misdemeanors that a leader can commit, to lie and trick his own people into a war of conquest. You show me where in the Constitution the government is allowed to do that. Now, Catalonia just had a major election for their regional parliament back on the 21st. The pro-independence parties won an absolute majority in the parliament. It was a sweep. And basically now the Catalan parliament is wholly on board with independence. So the King of Spain has basically come on out saying, really, the parliament has to respect different political views. Meaning, even though the Catalan voters voted a pro-independence parliament into power, that really they ought to just not really focus too much on the pro-independence and just realize there are other views, like keeping Spain and Europe glued together. But it's very obvious all across Europe that this idea of being part of a large union, a continent-spanning union, collective, it's worn out. People don't want to be part of that anymore. We're seeing it in Catalonia. We're hearing about portions of Italy want to break off now, Lombardia and Venice. Now, Sebastian Kurz, who heads a right-wing coalition government with the far-right Freedom Party, is strongly against the view that migrants who come to a European Union country should be distributed across the member states under a quota system. Mr. Kurz told the German daily Bild am Sonntag, forcing states to take refugees doesn't take Europe any further. It makes no sense. And basically saying that if they continue jamming more refugees into the European Union, it will divide the EU. And member states will decide on their own how many people they will welcome. They're regaining control over their borders. Now, up in Switzerland, their president is now calling for a referendum to clarify their relations with the European Union. This is more of the pushback. Because the European Union was originally sold to the people of Europe as little more than a free travel, free trade bloc of nations. The outer border of the EU would be enforced, and all the internal borders between the member states would basically just be left open. No passports, no visas. You could go from France to Spain to Britain to Italy just by driving around. And that was very attractive to the people of Europe. But over the intervening years, Brussels has grabbed more and more power and authority to itself and eroded the sovereignty of the member nations. And now they're starting to push on back. So the Swiss president wants a referendum to clarify their relations with Brussels. What Brussels can do, more importantly, what Brussels cannot do. Now, getting on back to Pope Francis, among other things that he said during his Christmas message, he tried to equate the migrant flow into Europe with the journey of Mary and Joseph to Bethlehem. And that got a lot of people very upset, because if you actually understand the story of Mary and Joseph going to Bethlehem, they weren't migrating. They had been ordered to go to Bethlehem as part of the Roman taxation system. You would go back to the city of your birth, you'd pay your taxes, then you'd turn around and you'd go home again. And it was all within the same country, the Roman Empire. And so, no, the migrants coming out of Africa and the Middle East, they're not just going for a visit to Europe and going home. They're not going up there to pay taxes. And they've basically gone into Europe to plunder, rape, and steal. And the Pope was just really not thinking when he made that comment. I'll give you this. He's an interesting Pope. Some of the things he said I really like, and some of the things he says just come across as incredibly uninformed. Now, up in Sweden, there was what was called the Ficha case, where this 5 men gang raped this woman, and they were acquitted by the court. And a lot of people think that there was pressure brought to bear to not have a guilty plea, because the rape epidemic is a hot topic for people who want stronger borders. So apparently within hours of this acquittal of these 5 men charged with gang raping this girl, there were petitions and crowdfunding efforts started in Sweden. They raised 100,000 signatures saying something has to be done about immigration. And apparently they raised something like $70,000 for the victim herself. But just trying to pretend that it's not going on is not going to solve the problem. YouTube, apparently in the wake of this acquittal, temporarily banned Europeans from viewing this documentary by Cernovich on Sweden's migrant rape crisis. No, you can't see that. We don't want you thinking about that. All right, let's grab a phone call here. Rick in Arizona. Aloha, Rick. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
The European Union, the European Union, even back before when they were talking about it, I always thought it was kind of suspicious. We've got all these countries that have been at war with each other for how many years? 500 years. And it really looks like the whole thing was put together just so they could surprise attack the country with all these immigrants and to diminish the white population. I don't think the people are sophisticated enough to realize that a very small number of people in Europe are behind all this, and it's basically, I think it's basically the banking system.
Well, the bankers want a single global private central bank. They don't want there to be any kind of an alternative system out there that people can watch and learn from. That's why they're trying to eradicate the last few countries that have a much more workable economic system. That's why they spent so much time working against the young United States, which was operating an economy that wasn't based on borrowing everything from a banker.
Yeah, well, I think what they're going to do, they're going to let the EU fall apart, and then all these countries will have all these immigrants, and they'll all go back to their own currency. And who knows what will happen after that? I don't know. I doubt another war. I don't think people really want to fight it, but I think it'll all go back to where it was, where you're going to end up having to have a visa to go into this country and to that country. I don't think it's going to hold up.
Well, I'm seeing the signs of strains around the EU, but I think what's going to happen when the EU falls apart and the EU nations regain their full sovereignty, they're going to start rounding up these migrants and refugees, and they're going to send them back home.
I'll bet against that. Well, thanks for taking my call.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. Most of these people who are in Europe right now have not officially been accepted as refugees. They're still being processed, which can take years, and they can still be refused and shown the border. Let's take another phone call. Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. How are you feeling?
Almost back to my normal self here. Claire is unfortunately still not doing well at all, and I'm probably going to take her to the doctor in the next day or two.
I hope she feels better. Hey, Mike, you're just the last caller. It's all about diminishing the population of a country's culture, but it's also about trying to prop up a dying economic system because they got low birth rates over there. And there's a trade-off. They bring these people in, but they don't assimilate, and they form their own, basically, countries inside. It's a disaster. It's just a disaster that you can see the disaster not only there, but here.
Yes.
Look at the cultures you got in Chicago and Detroit, and now Minnesota and all. I mean, it's the same style thing going on. You know, it's just man, Mike, it's destined to fail.
All right, Dustin, stay on the line. We got to do a commercial break. I'm going to come right back to you after these words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're talking with Dustin in New Jersey, and Dustin, just pick up where you left off.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to talk about Switzerland also, with all the migrant stuff going on in the EU. You know, if the Swiss were smart, you know, which they're not, but if they were, they would go with the Russia and the Chinese access, because if you look at Pakistan, they want to dump the U.S. dollar. There's grumble. I mean, everybody's lining up, Mike. Like, you know,
yes.
It just seems like everybody's getting ready, and it's like, you know, who's going to be the first person to do it, and who's going to be stuck being the last person, you know? And it doesn't help with us being at the UN. I mean, the UN's a corrupt. They need reorganization, but, you know, most governments of the world is corrupt, including us. We're up there with the number 3, you know. But, I mean, with the whole, like, if it's our way or the highway, well, you know what? They're all going to tell us, hit the highway, Jack. You know, hit the road, Jack. That's what's going to happen. And, you know, we can, you know, we're nationalists, but, you know, you need to be a global trading partner also. But, you know, what's going to happen is, you know, people, these countries realize, you know, you don't want to play ball or make deals or just, it's either our way or no way. You know, they're just going to say, all right, see ya. You know, they could do deals with China. I mean, they're doing deals with China already.
Yes,
you know,
they are.
EU's their biggest. Yeah, I mean, it's a matter of time, Mike. Like this attitude that not just Trump has and Nikki Haley, but it's ingrained in like elements of our government and even some of the population. This attitude problem, you know, it's going to hit us real bad if people want to play it that way. You know,
well, you know, back at the end of World War II, when the Bretton Woods Agreement was hammered out, it actually did make sense because accounts were being settled with boxes of currency, if not gold bullion. It actually made sense for everybody to acknowledge one currency as being global for the sake of convenience. And that's why they went along with this idea of the U.S. dollar, good as gold, around the world. But the U.S. took advantage of that situation. They overprinted the dollars. They didn't have the gold to back it up. But today, in an age of instantaneous global financial transactions and confirmation, the idea of needing a single global currency is an obsolete idea. But the U.S. doesn't want to let go of that, because what the U.S. does by having the world use the dollar for cross-border trade and banking is they're literally making money off of other people's commerce. They're literally draining wealth out of other countries just for the permission to use that piece of paper and colored ink. Because the U.S. economy got lazy over Bretton Woods, all this wealth is pouring on in. We don't need to actually do anything. We've allowed our manufacturing to decline over the last 30 years, and nobody wants our GMO agriculture. And so the U.S. economy is in a real corner, because if the rest of the world does stop using that dollar, then the value of the dollar is going to plummet, because there's nothing backing it up. And it'll just fall right down into the basement.
Yeah, who wants to buy a Caterpillar when they can buy a Komatsu?
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like, nobody. You know, and throwing out rhetoric saying, you know, do this or else. No, we'll buy Komatsu. You know, there's other trading partners out there that'll do business, you know, You know, hey, Mike, did you see this new report? China's the #1 economy in the world. I don't know why this report's saying in 15 years. I know there's two ways to view the #1 economy of the world, but I think China is the #1, according to like a PPP, I think it's called.
Yes.
But I mean, they're the economic powerhouse of the world. I mean, we don't make anything. I think we got 12 to 14% manufacturing, and it's not coming back. There's 7% growth per year, and what are we, negative to 3%? If you believe that, I don't believe it.
No, China's a manufacturing powerhouse, and China can make things we can't. The United States cannot manufacture an iPhone inside the United States. We have to go to China to get these things done. And it's the reason we have $1.5 billion trade deficit every single day. And so, yeah, it's...
Mike, I just get mad how we, like, well, Trump and all these other people say, oh, they're manipulating their current... What have we been doing? Like, since 1971. You know, that's why we got taken off the gold standards, because we had more claim tickets than the gold to redeem it. Yeah.
Absolutely.
We've been running a scam. Yeah, we've been running a scam for 50, 60 years.
That's
but
exactly
we got to demonize them,
It's exactly what it was.
Mike, I want to switch.
Okay.
Oh, no, I wanted to just switch topics totally.
Okay, well, we've got another we've got another
Okay.
commercial break coming up here, so I'm going to have to put you back on hold. Don't hang up, and we'll come back with your new topic. Meanwhile, filling in the gap between here and the start of the commercials, do you remember there was that Berlin Christmas market jihad attack? Apparently, some people put up a little memorial for the people who were victims, and the police took it down. Oh, it makes the immigrants look bad. And apparently somebody's snuck back in and put up another memorial. We're going to take a break for commercials. Back with Justin after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Here we're still talking with Dustin in New Jersey. You said you had one more topic.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about the new topic, which really has nothing to do with anything. But you're right with these people. If you set up a little memorial for somebody, the liberals will come over and destroy it or steal the stuff, because it's not what they view of the world. It's their way or the highway, just like the EU and all these other people. All right, Mike, changing topics, I want to know what your take is on, like, all this, like, the renderings. I mean, I'm like into computer graphics, but the technology now, the rendering speeds, than, like, what was in the, in the 90s, it was so slow. They had the silicon workstation.
Silicon graphics.
Silicon graphic workstations.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, they were huge, they were cooled, refrigeration, right? They were like gigantic machines. I mean, the rendering speeds, you can work right out of your home now.
Yes, absolutely.
It's amazing,
and of course, I sort of grew up with that industry, and I started with Robert Abel and Associates. And yes, we even before the silicon graphics machines came along, we were working with Evans and Sutherland vector display systems. And the rendering speeds were very, very primitive. Today, it's just absolutely amazing. Of course, the software is also a lot more demanding because it's able to do a lot more. So there's sort of a trade-off there. But yeah, back when I was still producing TV commercials. Hang on a second. Are you okay? Are you okay? Okay, I'm sorry. I had to check on Claire. I'm hearing noises coming from where she is, and with all this rain coming down and thunder outside, I'm not sure what she's saying. Okay. Anyway, yeah, it's been kind of an amazing process to watch over the years, going back to the 80s and up to today with what can be done with the software. And every once in a while, I'll still haul it out and play with it just for the fun of it. I do the Christmas cards with it.
And Mike, I just want to ask you, I'm a big Ray Harryhausen fan.
Yes.
Did you ever see Coraline?
Yes, I did.
Coraline was amazing. Yeah, I want anybody who's listening, if you like movies and the computer animation and stop motion, Coraline was one of the most incredible movies, I think.
Well, that was a case of using computer animation to simulate stop-motion animation. And it was kind of an interesting artistic use of the medium. But more and more we're seeing computer animation sort of pulling away from that ultra photorealistic dinosaur kind of thing and becoming much more stylistic and creative. And that's what makes it fun.
All right, thanks, Mike. Have a good show, and tell Claire I hope she feels better.
I'm certainly going to pass that along to her because she's not doing very well, and as soon as the show is over, I got to go take care of her. Alrighty, getting on back here. I'm getting a bunch of emails from people who are saying they saw the same thing I did Christmas morning. The trash bins are not as full as they were this time last year. So all this talk about what an amazing runaway shopping season it was may just be more propaganda to flog you all back down to the malls. Fox News was just running a story a little while ago about Hillary Clinton coming on out and campaigning for Democratic candidates next year during the midterms. And more people are saying that might not actually be a very good idea. And obviously there is that fanatical core of Hillary supporters who will come on out because they want to see her highnessness and wave at her and the rest of it. But it may, I think, for people who are not part of that fanatical liberal view, may actually be a negative. With all that happened last year and with all that may be coming out in the very near future, Hillary's brand is damaged. And she could turn out to be a real albatross around the neck of the Democratic National Party. And there's more than a few leaders in the DNC are saying they just wish she would shut up and go away. All right, we're going to take another phone call here. Mark in Florida, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. I wanted to say I wish Claire well. When I come down like that, I chop up cloves of garlic into little pieces and take it like aspirin, and it really helps me out. So I really wish her well. I hate to hear.
Yeah, well, we're dealing with some complications here, and like I said, as soon as the show is over, the rest of the day I'm just going to be taking care of her.
No, I wish her well. I wanted to comment on the previous caller. He brought up the idea that the illegals are forming their own like little neighborhoods and little kingdoms. And my idea is shouldn't be the real concern. The concern is that our government, our mayors, our councils have done the same thing. They formed the little kingdoms and they rule us like they're little serfs. And that's where the people should be concerned. It's not so much that the illegals are in the way or causing us harm. It's our local government from the city all the way up to the president that are doing the exact same things that allow these illegals to do what they're doing.
Yeah, you hit it on the head. This is being allowed to happen by governments that supposedly are supposed to be responsible to their own citizens. And as I mentioned earlier, we have all these programs to bring refugees and immigrants into our economic system, but there's no mechanism to return homeless American citizens who've dropped out the bottom of the system. There's no mechanism to bring them back in. And that, to me, I think shows a tremendous betrayal of the people by the government that is supposed to be our representative in managing our nation's sovereignty.
Well, I agree, and that's why I say, you said our local government and our state, city, and county, they're the ones perpetrating this fraud because they themselves have set up their own little kingdom where they get millions in benefits and provide zero services or zero accountability. It's just terrible. We got to concentrate on our local government and how corrupt they are as liars and thieves, and we would never have an illegal problem if our own people weren't such corrupt.
Yeah,
garbage.
Well, unfortunately, when you have people like George Soros who've got huge amounts of money to hand on out, they can basically change the country to what they think is whatever ideal they're holding in their head. And like I said, Soros reminds me very much of the villain in this 1990s Michael Caine movie, The $1 Billion Brain, where Ed Begley played this Texas oil billionaire who just decided he was going to start World War III with the Soviet Union all by himself. And Soros is playing that very same dangerous game. Now, he's not trying to start a global war, to the best of my knowledge, but he's definitely out there pushing this one world government, new world order idea. And he's got enough money where he's got tremendous amounts of influence, especially when you consider this guy has not been elected to any office by any voters anywhere.
Right, and he's buying the liars and thieves, the Al Capones that we have been tricked into voting for and electing into office, and that's where it is. Our problem is not the immigrants. Our problem is our own government.
Our problem is both. Our problem is both. Because of the sellouts in our government who are pushing the open borders agenda in sanctuary cities, violating U.S. immigration law, we have an immigrant problem. They're both problems, okay?
Yeah, I suppose, but it's local. It's local.
No, it's pretty much national. It's pretty much all over Europe. Thank you for the phone call. We're going to let you go. And let's see, getting on back to Europe. In Switzerland, somebody did a study looking back at the numbers. 94.9% of asylum seekers in the city of Basel are on benefits. They're just costing huge amounts of money. There are some places in Europe where the load of the refugees on the economy is so great, they're actually raising the mandatory retirement age so they can save money on the pensioners. Not have to pension them off so early. Work them a few years longer, take that money, give it to the refugees. And I think people living in those countries, born in those countries, can be looking at the government and saying, whose side are you on here? Now, apparently with the influx of refugees, there also seems to be a lot of gun running going on. And so Scandinavia apparently is being flooded with arms smuggled from the Balkans. And they're getting some very serious weapons, such as the Serbian Zastava and Czech-Serbian Scorpion machine guns. And not too surprisingly, there's been an increase in shooting incidents, primarily involving the refugees here. Now, Tucker Carlson did a segment challenging the orthodox view that the refugees and the immigrants are really very good people, that they're more likely to be law-abiding than your average American, that they're actually safer to be around than the average American, and he basically tore it apart. And the first thing he did is point on out that the U.S. government does track crime statistics by all kinds of different categories, but for some reason has never tracked according to immigration status. It's a number they don't want to know. Never ask a question if you do not want to hear the answer. But apparently some other groups have been keeping track of the numbers. And so here it comes on down right now. First of all, you need to understand, these illegal immigrants broke our laws just stepping across the border. And they're being assisted by Americans who are also breaking the law in order to assist them. Title 8. So according to the report cited by Tucker Carlson, 22% of murders are being committed by illegal immigrants, 18% of fraud, 33% of money laundering, 29% of drug trafficking, and 72% of drug possession. So this puts an end to the idea that all of these illegal immigrants and refugees are really nice people. If we just give them all a green card, it'll be hunky-dory. Remember, migration, sneaking across a border, it's a filtration process. You're not getting the good people from those source countries. They're happy where they are. They're successful. They don't have a reason to leave. What we're getting are the people who couldn't make it in their home countries. We're getting people who are probably fleeing prosecution for crimes they committed in their home country, and now they're going to commit those crimes in the new country. I'm willing to speculate here that all of those refugees up in Sweden who've turned it into the rape capital of the world were probably doing exactly the same thing before they went to Sweden. Now, apparently, there was this investigative journalist, 33-year-old Bekir Rabbani, was a hugely popular Swedish independent reporter, and apparently he was found dead at his home last Friday in suspicious circumstances. And he was working on an investigation into the radical leftist mainstream journalist Robert Aschberg and his connection to George Soros-funded extremist organizations when he was killed. Shortly before he died, Rabbani had revealed he was about to lift the lid on mass corruption that linked Soros and Aschberg. So it looks like Soros is starting his own dead bodies list now. So as long as we're talking about the horrible weather that's out there, for people who are trying to get home after Christmas, it has been a nightmare. Something like 3,500 flights have been delayed, more than 50 have been canceled. There was one incident where an aircraft literally skidded on the runway. Nobody got hurt, but it indicates the weather they're dealing with here. So as the old Farmer's Almanac had predicted, winter arrived late, but it is hitting hard. I've got people who are sending me in photos of their thermometers. Up in Canada, minus 30 degrees centigrade. That is cold. Right now, there are temperatures colder than parts of the Arctic Circle getting ready to hit the U.S. Let's see, much of this week through New Year's, single digits to negative temps to minus 25 to minus 40 degree Fahrenheit wind chills, snow in the deep south. Erie, Pennsylvania set an all-time record of 34 inches of snow in their Christmas blizzard. New York City is dealing with biting winds on New Year's Eve, cold grips central and eastern USA. And I tell you, I hope they got those shelters out for the homeless people. They will freeze to death in that wind chill. There is no question about it. Meanwhile, up in Canada, they have this website over at Policy Horizons, and they came out with an announcement saying that Santa Claus has signed an agreement to move his workshop, his elves, and his reindeer to the South Pole because of the global warming in the Arctic. That's just a little bit out there. Now, over in Norway, there's a huge lawsuit getting underway. And the lawsuit is basically a bid to stop the future oil exploration in Norway. And obviously, this lawsuit will have far-reaching consequences for Norway's oil and gas industry, indeed all of Europe. It was filed by environmentalists Greenpeace and Nature and Youth with the Grandparents' Climate Campaign as an intermediary. Now, the plaintiffs contend that the government's June 2016 decision to allow oil drilling in 10 vulnerable areas of the Barents Sea constitutes a breach of the Norwegian Constitution and the Paris Climate Accord, which Norway signed. So what's going to happen is if Greenpeace is actually able to get this court to say, no, you can't drill for oil there, they're going to hit all those other countries that signed the Paris Climate Accord and try and shut down their oil drilling and exploration. And by the way, I notice Greenpeace and all these other people who are out there saying oil is bad, petroleum is bad, they have yet to come up with a workable alternative to keep our civilization going. They love to talk about solar panels and windmills, but they've never worked out. They've never penciled out. Until you have a replacement, we have to stay with what's working. We'll be right back after these words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And the phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. So we're talking about how Greenpeace and some other organizations are up in Norway trying to get the government to halt oil exploration drilling on the basis of the Paris Climate Accord. And the problem I have with all of this is, first of all, the idea that hydrocarbon fuels are warming the planet is pretty much been disproved. But more importantly, these idealists come up with this idea about we should get rid of oil and gas. Okay, what are you going to replace it with? And that's where it all falls apart. They've come up with some schemes like ethanol, which didn't work out. It's not carbon neutral. You have to buy and burn more of it to do the same amount of work as a smaller amount of gasoline, and it destroys the fuel systems in older cars. But they don't think about all these little details. They just have a buzzword. We're going to burn ethanol. It'll be carbon neutral because the plants will suck the carbon dioxide out of the air and we'll just burn it over and over and over again. Same thing with solar cells. Solar cells are good. Solar cells can help reduce your electric bill. But to try and power the entire nation, including our factories, on solar power, most of the people are going to be living in the shade their entire lives. Windmills have not held up. They don't have any place to store the energy when there's too much wind for times when there isn't any wind. If it's overcast and no wind, solar and windmills simply do not work. And unfortunately, they tend to put up the windmills in the areas with the most wind, which also happens to be the migration routes of birds. And so these giant spinning windmills are actually chopping up birds during their migration. Now, let's talk a little bit about computers. As you know, there's been a big stink over the fact that Apple appears to have been slowing down older models of the iPhone using their software updates, which every once in a while you get a new update, and apparently some very sharp-eyed users began to realize that their phones were not performing the way they did when they were new. And apparently it's now been confirmed that, yes, Apple was remotely slowing down older iPhones. And Apple is claiming that they're trying to maximize the overall lifespan of the device by conserving the battery, because the slower the iPhone runs, the less strain there is on the battery. That's what they're saying. Now, for most users, they would say, well, just give us the option to replace the battery. And if you're my age, you remember when the first smartphones, first cell phones came out, yeah, you could replace the battery yourself. Not on the iPhones. Apple's always had this idea that you get a battery with the appliance, whether it's an iPod or an iPad or an iPhone, and when the battery dies, you just get a new one. All right, so we're going to take a break for station identification. We'll come back to this issue right after these words from our sponsors. Join us on the air, 800-313-9443. America, welcome back to our show here. Hour number 3, the phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. We're talking about Apple being caught using the software updates to older iPhones to slow them down. Now, Apple said it was to maximize the battery life. Critics are saying it appears to be an attempt to degrade the performance of the older iPhones to encourage you to buy the newer, faster iPhones. And it's resulted in lawsuits all over the place. Basically, some of them are class action lawsuits accusing Apple of duping owners into buying the newer versions of the device by slowing down and degrading the older units. And there have been allegations that the computer industry as a whole engages in this practice, that every time Microsoft wants to come out with a new operating system, and they understand that we're all reluctant to change our operating systems because we've put years into setting up our computer systems between the OS and the applications and everything. That's a lot of work. And we finally get it fine-tuned to do what we want it to do, and then all of a sudden things start going wrong, and we're being encouraged to buy the latest and greatest upgrade. So Apple is being sued by quite a few people, and analysts, as a result, are now cutting forecasts for the sales of the iPhone X. They're saying demand is very lukewarm. Apple stock took a hit on that. And yeah, it's not an attractive phone. That facial recognition system has got major problems, and it's a $1,000 phone. That really is way over the top. In a healthy, productive economy, people can do that. In this economy, no, they cannot. And deliberately sabotaging our older iPhones to try and get us to buy a new iPhone is not going to work. Most people will just live with the slower performance. Unless they're gaming addicts or streaming lots of movies, most people probably wouldn't even notice the slowdown anyway. All right, let's go to the telephone here. Sheldon in Spokane, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, just two quick ones, but I hope you two have a better New Year than we did last one, for sure.
Yes.
You know, it's funny, when cars came out and you had a car or a truck, you were just lucky to have one. And then somebody got this idea, well, we need to make a new one every year. And that got so ingrained in all the cultures that now you have to have next year's computer, phone. If it costs money, oh, you need the one that's coming out next year, you know? But the reason I really called is, go ahead.
Yeah, I want to respond to that. I mean, it's called planned obsolescence. And again, when you have an economy where pretty much everybody is working, they've got disposable income, they can play to that vanity about having the latest and greatest whatever. But that doesn't function in an economy where most people are just barely getting by. And there aren't enough really rich people to keep all these industries in business. And that's where it begins to start to come apart. But yeah, the business model is that products that would last for a long time or products that the end user can repair and keep going are a bad business model. And that's why we have iPhones that we're not allowed to go in and repair. And this whole issue with the battery and the slowdown has reignited the right to repair debate, in which they're talking about laws that say companies that sell you products have to be able to provide spare parts and the means for you to repair them yourself if you feel like doing so. And again, the model is a new car every 5 years and a new computer every 5 years. And they're literally engineered to fail after 5 years. And it's quite a contrast here, because I've got this Commodore VIC-20 up here on the top of this shelf, and it still works perfectly. So don't tell me that they can't make these things last any much longer. They do. There was a documentary out there called Pyramids of Waste, or the Light Bulb Conspiracy, talking about planned obsolescence, about how literally things like computer printers are engineered to fail after so many sheets of paper. And you'll take it into the shop and they'll say, well, it's going to cost more to repair than just buying a new one. And that's just to keep product churning and keep money flowing out of your pocket into their pocket. And one of the interesting little things they had in there is that for those of us who remember the tungsten light bulb, the standard Edison light bulb, the lifespan on those bulbs prior to being phased out by compact fluorescence and LED lights was about half the length of Edison's original design. Because when light bulbs started becoming big business, they formed this cartel, the Phoebus Group, I think it was called. And it simply said, if you're going to be manufacturing and selling light bulbs, you're part of our organization, you will design the light bulbs to fail after only 1,000 hours. And anybody who made a light bulb that lasted longer than that would actually be penalized. And so, again, it's all about forcing people to buy the same product over and over and over again.
Well, on a shorter call, I'll call back and talk about the software issues on the John Deere tractors that the farmers can't fix themselves. But what I really called for, and you'll know this, it's about software. I quit watching TV about probably 5 years ago, so it probably came out about 7 years ago. If you could put in your head an image that we can both relate to, the picture of George Washington crossing the river and the flag's in the back and it's kind of waving in the wind.
Yeah. That's Washington crossing the Delaware.
Say again?
Washington crossing the Delaware.
Right. What is the name of the software? Discovery Channel was the first that I noticed used it at length, where you'll have a two-dimensional or a one flat picture. And although everything is static, it would appear that the camera's moving on the fourth wall, and it wouldn't make the actual object move. but you could see it would reveal things behind the flag. As this camera were to be moving across the landscape, as it were, you could see other new trees that's behind there that really aren't there. So this software has to create from something that's already there something else, and they're using it on all these old black and white pictures and stuff. And
well,
it's
what they're doing is they're breaking out the various elements and putting them into what's called a multiplane space, and then in order to have some place to track, is they'll take the background and they'll actually shrink it down a little bit, or the foreground elements a little bit larger, so there's a little bit of room for them to slide without revealing the original source image for that element underneath. It's a pretty simple trick.
Yeah, that is exactly what's happened. Okay, is there a name for that, for that, doing that?
It's called multiplane. And it's a technique that the Disney Animation Studios pioneered many, many years ago for Peter Pan was when they developed the first multiplane camera. But as far as its digital modern counterpart, I don't know who sells it, who markets it.
Okay, thank you, sir.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. We're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. And getting on back here, let's talk about, well, vaccines and things. Because, again, getting back to Claire and my illness, it was a nasty one. This is the sickest we've been for, since I had my stay in the hospital 3 years ago. And it's rather amazing. We got a follow-up call from Claire's doctor. They don't actually know all that much about it. What they know is it's got a 9-day incubation period, which is very long, and they don't really have a good grasp on how long it will last, except that it does last longer for us older people. But one thing that I got from the clinic, as well as from some other sources, that nurses who emailed in, this year's flu shot had no effect on it whatsoever. So, now, a little bit of a story. This was in the week in Great Britain, and it's a flashback story back in 2004, where apparently Merck, one of America's largest pharmaceutical companies, issued a sudden recall of Vioxx, which was an anti-pain medication widely used to treat arthritis-related ailments. And the recall came just days after Merck discovered that a top medical journal was going to publish a study by an FDA investigator indicating that the drug in question greatly increased the risk of fatal heart attacks and strokes, and had probably been responsible for at least 55,000 American deaths during the 5 years it had been on the market. It ultimately turned out Merck had known all along of these side effects since launching the drug in 1999, but had basically brushed it under the rug. And I mention that because ultimately this is all about money. It's all about making money and selling product in a country where the government will turn a blind eye as long as money is being made and shared with the government through taxes. So, now apparently Hillary is out there still begging for money. She put on a tweet about how she and the foundation are still doing good work and please donate. After James Woods basically came on out with a tweet saying, shouldn't you be packing for Argentina? And then he signed it, #uranium1. I, for one, want to see some investigation happen that leads to some charge brought against Hillary Clinton. I know they will never allow the full enormity of the crimes of the last 30 years to come on out, or the American people would absolutely abandon this government. But right now, the American people are seeing that our government isn't working for the people or for this country. We see our government working for Israel. We see our government waging war on countries that have done nothing wrong to us other than to decide to want to go their own way. And we definitely see the government not working when we see indications of massive criminality of our political leaders continue to go unpunished. Now, I like all this talk that we're hearing out of members of Congress about investigations and subpoenas, but at this point, it's still all talk. And we have seen investigations before that turned out to be other cover-ups. They did a lot of talking during the Warren Commission, and it was still a cover-up. They investigated TWA 800. That was a cover-up. For me, the proof is in the pudding. When Hillary Clinton gets those handcuffs slapped on her and heads off for her day at court, then I'll believe the government is back to functioning somewhat along the way they should be. All right, let's take some phone calls. David in San Francisco, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, Michael, happy Christmas. Yeah, I guess you had a happy Christmas, huh?
Well, we stayed home and basically rested trying to get over this bug.
Oh, you got a bug. Well, we had nice potluck up in our place, so I live in an apartment building, so yeah, we had a common kitchen up in there. Man, it was a fat little meal. I waddled away after the pumpkin pie. I mean, my God. Hey, you know, a couple of things. I was going to look at what you were talking about from the economic angle and the laws of physics.
Mm-hmm.
And you remember with laws of physics, for every action, there's a separate and equal reaction.
Mm-hmm.
Well, as far as I can see, money is set up so that for every action, there's a separate and equal reaction plus profit. And
well, first of all, let me caution you against trying to equate monetary systems with the real physical world, because they're not. Money is an abstraction. It's an idea. It's basically it's an arbitrary set of rules that benefit the bankers, and it is not, in fact, constrained by Sir Isaac Newton's laws.
Yeah, you can't trade potatoes for onions. Like are you keeping up with in India? They have a new fake money system over there called was it Aadhaar? AADHAAR.
Okay.
There's a pair of A's in it. Aadhaar. Yeah, there's a fake thing, man. It says like you can't trade onions for, over your back fence. Trade some onions for a cabbage or something like that without having, Aadhaar keep a transaction of it for eternity. They've set up there. Didn't I hear the other day that if you look at Bitcoin, they have a management fee of like $2,400 per Bitcoin. And if you look at if a Bitcoin's going for 17 grand, I think that's what it was when I read this article. And this is from Forbes, if I remember right, this article I'm thinking about. And it was about the energy costs, how much electricity it's taken to run Bitcoin. And apparently they've got all of these coal-fired plants in China where about some huge percentage of the electricity of Bitcoin is coming from China. And so they're like polluting their skies just to keep the security tight on Bitcoins. And I mean, it's kind of a crazy thing. So it's like $2,400 just to manage a $17,000 a Bitcoin. And if you look at that, what was it, like 12%? And I don't even think the Federal Reserve gets that much.
Well, I'm not familiar with the management fee. I'm just now getting into Bitcoin. The problem with that management fee is that if the value of the Bitcoin itself goes below $2,400, then the whole system is going to collapse. And it's not just China that is doing the Bitcoin mining. One of the biggest problems computer users around the world are facing is malware that comes into your computer from a compromised website, or even some social media websites are just doing this on their own, where they'll insert JavaScript on your machine to mine Bitcoins using your computer, your electricity, and that's a global problem. And to me, it signals that we may be seeing an inflationary bubble in Bitcoin.
Well, that's why I raised the laws of physics, because, if you imagine, if they were powering it with solar, that would be one thing. You already built your whole power plant is the solar panels, And if you plan on doing the biggest amount of your transactions while the sun's shining, you can get a whole lot done, and you're basically not leveling mountains just to get some coal out of the ground to burn it. And so you could environmentally, you could see why the electronic money might make sense. But if you get it into burning firewood in order to keep your money system going, you're going to burn down every tree in the planet, and there's still not going to be enough money. In fact, I've talked to you about LIBOR, right, where some economists had looked at the value of the entire world, like all of the water, all of the copper, all of the steel, all of the trees, all of this and that, was $24 trillion. Well, the LIBOR scandal had milked approximately, what I gave up looking at it when it was, I think it was $550 trillion. So it was like, was that 48-fold the scale of the earth?
I don't think you mean LIBOR. I think you're talking about the derivatives exposure.
Well, yeah, I mean, LIBOR is the interest rates, right? So if you extended out every 30-year mortgage to this amount of cash, every, shopping mall that was using the LIBOR, $100 million shopping mall, and you extend out the financing on it, we've got a Bay Bridge out here that cost $6 billion, and they had another $6 billion in financing.
Yes.
So that would be an example of stupid LIBOR. But that's more than the value. It's like 48 times the value of the entire planet is. And so eventually you end up chopping down all the trees and digging up all the fish and potatoes, and everything is used up. You can't. The laws of money are so fake to begin with, and then they get into a management. Yeah, it's like a management fee of $2,400 just to manage your money.
Well, I hadn't heard that one. I hadn't heard that one. But, banking is not a science. It's a religion. It's an arbitrarily a set of beliefs and assumptions that we are indoctrinated in, that we believe represent something real, that makes us subservient to the bankers.
Numerology, you could say.
In a way, yes.
Yeah, it's preposterous. I know. I got into it from the laws of physics. My parents were environmentalists, and, they just showed how, basically you got a company that's too cheap to clean up their mess. And they leave their mess, and somebody gets poisoned by it, and the next generation gets poisoned by it, and the next generation, and they never clean it up, and they walk off to, to Paris or someplace where they're...
David, sorry, got to let you go. We got to take a break for commercials. I got to check on Claire, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Our phone lines are open, 800-313-9443 on this Boxing Day. And we're going to go right to the telephones here. Ramsey in Canada. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, sir. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Happy Boxing Day.
Yeah, same to you. And I wish Claire all the best. Yes, teacher, I just want to tell you something. Today I went to the store to buy look for the antivirus, the Kaspersky brand.
Yes.
Because I buy it all the time. But then the guy told me at the store, they don't sell it anymore because in the last few months, the store decided not to bring it anymore because it does not provide the protection that it's supposed to. And then I told them, isn't that like a lie that was made up to damage the company's name? And then he said no, that was true. So is it true that what he said that or am I right or is the guy at the store is right?
Well, I think the guy at the store is trying to get you to buy what he wants to sell you, which is another trend we're seeing in commerce where you can't go and buy what you want anymore. You get down there and they've got a couple of things and, you get one of these and take that and get home for it. There is an attack on Kaspersky. They're trying to blame Kaspersky as a security threat as part of the Russia bashing that's going on. But Kaspersky has made every effort to prove that their software is not a security threat, and they've got a great reputation for years and years. And so I think it's a case of bad-mouthing a competitor's product to sell something that you want to sell. And we see that happen all the time, where somebody will come on out with a news report saying, oh, this product turned out to be really, really bad. And everybody scurries away from that product and buys something else. And then it comes on out later that the news report was put out at the request of the competitor to badmouth the competition and draw the business. And there have been several big scandals involving corporate media, like exploding side-mounted fuel tanks. There was the Food Lion scandal. Corporate media, if you pay them enough money, they'll do hit pieces on your business competitors to destroy their business and bring the business to you. Remember when, I think it was Chipotle, announced they were going GMO-free, and then all of a sudden they're getting hit with all these E. coli outbreaks all across the country. And that's how a lot of commerce absolutely works. Now, as far as I'm concerned, Kaspersky is one of the best ones that's out there. It has the advantage that it's not written here in the United States of America, because we know that all of the antivirus, anti-malware products written in the United States of America are mandated to allow the NSA and CIA's hacker tools to entry into your system. And so why would you even waste your money on an American-produced anti-malware system when it's the U.S. government that you're most concerned about breaking into your computer and stealing your business secrets?
Yeah, because see, sir, I told him, because he said, like, this store, like, he used to sell Kaspersky all the time. Like I bought it every year from that store. But he told me, and then I told him the same thing that they just said, like, all this Russia was all propaganda. He said, well, it's not really propaganda. It's just it was just overblown. And I told him, okay, whatever. Then I left. So.
Well, you know.
But yeah, like, I totally understand your point of what they're trying to do, like to sell other products.
Well, you can still order Kaspersky online. In fact, Kaspersky, once you're set up with it, you're paying a yearly subscription, and they send you the updates and improvements automatically. But it's always a good idea to have multiple layers of defense. Don't just rely on one. And you do need to be careful, because you can load up your system with so much security software that it's too slow to really use. So you have to really think about what you're doing. Kaspersky is a good foundation, but there are probably things that you could add on top of that that would make it more effective.
Good, thank you.
All right, thanks an awful lot. Okay, now then, speaking about computers and ego and vanity, the creator of Steemit, Dan Larimar, is out there saying that Steemit is changing social media forever. Of course, anytime somebody comes out with a new social media platform, they declare it's going to change social media forever. At this point, it's kind of hard to imagine any kind of a revolutionary development in terms of what social media is and does, because they all do images, they all do videos, they all do cute little text messages, and it's hard to see what the next major breakthrough might be that people would want to say, oh, we're going to leave Facebook, we're going to leave Twitter, and we're going to go on over to this other new thing. But it's still very competitive out there. We're going to take another break for commercials. Our phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Please call on in. Help me finish out the show today. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And we're going to go right to the telephones. Glenn in Roanoke, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. I've been using Kaspersky ever since I heard about it from John C. Dvorak on ZDTV back in the 90s. You may not be aware, but Kaspersky now has a free version of their antivirus program. I've been using it. Just letting you know. Have a great night.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. There's a lot of free stuff out there. Malwarebytes, anti-malware, I think they still have a free version. Spybot Search and Destroy is another good one. It's always best to have a multi-layered defense. And again, a little bit of common sense. When emails arrive with a clickable link, be very, very careful, because the problem is out of control. It really is out of control, and you have to wonder why with so much economic harm being done by cybercrime, by malware, why the government doesn't really seem to take much of an interest. Now, is it possible that the cyber criminals are actually working for the government? We already know that the police force are out there plundering the wealth of law-abiding citizens through the civil forfeiture laws. And maybe this epidemic of ransomware, which they're still trying to blame on North Korea, maybe it's just the virtual version of civil forfeiture. Just go on out and plunder and loot the people to keep feeding the war machine, to keep feeding Israel, to keep feeding the corruption. Now, one of the reasons Kaspersky may be a target right now is because Kaspersky outed the hacker collective, the Equation Group, as being NSA. So, a little bit on the upset, over in Prague, they have this high-end music club, the Karlovy Lázny Music Club, and apparently they have installed a robot disc jockey. And apparently it is this robotic arm that comes down from the ceiling, and it can choose songs. It can actually do the scratch on the record. You've seen where they make the music do weird things by playing with a turntable or something that looks like a turntable. And apparently it can even dance. And it alternates with its human counterpart in an hourly rotation. So you'll have a human DJ for an hour, then you have the robot DJ. Looks pretty impressive. Getting on back to Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, I have a feeling that banks and governments are still not entirely sure what they're dealing with, because we're seeing all these different reactions from the EU saying they're not going to regulate it. They don't see it as an alternative currency, to banks which are now starting to close their customers' accounts if there are any transactions using cryptocurrencies. And apparently, one good example, Lakestone Bank and Trust customer Jordan Spencer basically got a letter from his bank threatening to close his account because they caught him using Bitcoin. And apparently, Spencer had been using the Coinbase website to make cryptocurrency purchases and deposits tied to his personal bank account. And the bank said that is a tacky no-no. And so their loss prevention officer, Louise Vermillion, said that's a policy violation. And apparently, this triggered a huge outcry from bank customers who want to get into Bitcoin. But apparently the banks are now deciding for themselves what you should or should not be allowed to do with your money. Because remember, it may be in the bank. It's still your money. And the bank shouldn't be out there saying, we know better than you. We will manage your money for you. You just go work and we'll take care of everything else, which was the attitude of the antebellum plantation owners toward their slaves, who did all the work but were never allowed to touch any of the money. We're going to take a phone call. Gail in North Carolina, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. I'm just a little worried about you guys being sick, and I wanted to tell you, I know you probably maybe heard about essential oils. If you went and got a bottle of essential oils, oregano essential oils,
yes,
about a half a pint of coconut oil, and then put about 30 drops of oregano oil in that coconut oil and stirred it up. It's an antifungal, antiviral, and antibacterial. I've been using it for years. I've cured abscesses with it in my teeth before I had to have it pulled. I use it on my 16-year-old dog who coughs and her lungs get congested. I just cured my granddaughter from getting sick. She was fever. I mean, her lungs, I thought she was going to get pneumonia. If you take a teaspoon of that 3 times a day, you can rub it on the bottom of your feet, in your chest, in your back, and I'm telling you, it will knock it out because those antibiotics it'll kill your insides.
Well, Claire, of course, knows about all that kind of stuff, and she's been mixing up all these concoctions. And as I said, I'm pretty much over it at this point. And Claire's actually over the flu. The problem is today is that she was coughing so hard, she threw something in her back out, may have popped her rib out.
Geez.
And so I may have to take her to the chiropractor to get her put back together. Because she's actually done that before, but right now she's just got a tremendous amount of difficulty moving. So, you know, once the show is over, I'm going to be hovering over her and, you know, just making sure she stays still.
Yeah, well, I love you guys. I've been listening to you for about 5 years now. I just, you know, wanted to tell you about that. It does work. Even if you start feeling sick, you start taking it, you won't get it. I'm telling you, it's awesome.
All right. Well,
but anyway, I love you guys. I'll let you go. I love you.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Thanks an awful lot for the help, and thanks to everybody who's emailed in their best wishes for Claire's recovery, and I'm forwarding it all along to her. All right. We're going to go back to the phones here. Don in the Philippines. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. Yes, understand about your bank. I had the same problem with my bank. I wanted to get a little bit of cryptocurrencies with Coinbase, which is the way to do it if you're not a computer geek. I mean, which I'm not. I'm totally not a computer geek, and so I was trying to buy stuff with Coinbase, and my bank gave me all kinds of trouble. They said you could only put in $50 a week or something like that, and I got in. Then they actually wanted to argue with me about, hey, Coinbase. He might get hacked, and cryptocurrencies is all for crooks. And I mean, they gave me all kinds of stupid arguments. You know, like you say, the bottom line is it's your money, but they have Coinbase has I'm not working for Coinbase. I'm not getting paid by them or anything, but they have a list of banks that they like. It's basically the major banks in the United States, and these banks will support Coinbase purchases, but if it's a smaller regional bank, they won't do it.
Well, you need to understand our entire banking system, which is all tied up with the Federal Reserve. The last thing they want is for the American people to have a medium of exchange that is not being borrowed from them at interest. That's what the enslavement of private central bank is all about. You're not allowed to conduct commerce unless you borrow your currency at interest from the bankers. It's the same predatory banking system that led to the American Revolution. And the Federal Reserve sees cryptocurrencies as definitely a threat to their wealth and power and control. Because if there is a reliable currency system out here that is run on a peer-to-peer basis, then we don't need to borrow dollars from the Federal Reserve at interest any longer. And I would not be at all surprised if these major hacks against Bitcoin exchanges are being done by contractors hired by the bankers to try and destroy this alternative system before it really takes hold.
Right. Well, I don't know what's going to happen. I just wanted to. I'm not I have no computer expertise whatsoever, but I see something going straight up to the sky. I want to invest a little bit in there anyway and see what happens. It might. I think John McAfee said if it doesn't go up to $500,000 per Bitcoin, he'll so and so on TV, and I don't think it's going to go up that high, but whatever happens, anyway, I want to just be a little bit in there. Here's my own bank telling me, trying to argue with me.
Yes.
I couldn't believe it. So I had to open another account with one of the major banks, and I was able to do it.
Yeah, it is rather interesting to see how the banks are starting to act like they should be in charge of your financial decisions. And, of course, that's a big part of the push toward a cashless society where all of your money is always in their banks. And you have to petition their lordships to like buy a Twinkie or a newspaper or do some shopping through those little tiny plastic cards. And it's a tremendous loss of personal freedom and sovereignty.
Okay, Mike. Well, I don't know how much they're charging me for this. It's not toll free from here, so I got to let you go. Goodbye.
All right. Thanks an awful lot for the phone call here. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Now, Donald Trump is still down in Mar-a-Lago until after the new year. And I can't tell you right now how glad I am that we're not having to deal with Secret Service on this island over the holiday break, because during the Obama presidency, every single winter it was the same thing. Traffic jams, people peeking in our windows, and of course we still have the traffic jams because of the light rail system. But I'm really relieved we don't have to deal with that stuff. Anyway, so Trump is down at Mar-a-Lago, and he started getting on Twitter earlier today, and basically started railing on the Federal Bureau of Investigation and how they used this bogus Russian dossier, which has now been thoroughly discredited, as the basis for launching a probe into the 2016 Russia collusion conspiracy theory, of which there is no evidence whatsoever. And again, okay, I'm sorry, I'm hearing Claire. Okay. Basically, if you obtain a FISA warrant using fraudulent information, the warrant is invalid, and everything obtained under that warrant is inadmissible in court. Of course, if all you're doing is running a fishing expedition and just looking for things, then the admissibility is not a factor. All right, let's... he had this one comment about the dossier, the crooked Hillary pile of garbage. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Eric in Tennessee, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Michael, aloha. Bitcoin, I'm all over it. I'm the one that got you started at it. Thank you.
Well, I finally got a wallet and a Bitcoin donations button, and I've decided, rather than muck about with it a little bit, that's the beginning of my newer car fund, because we need to get a newer car. And,
there you go.
Yeah, so I'm letting those Bitcoins accumulate until I can afford, to buy some kind of another Honda. I love Hondas. Something that's only maybe 4 years old.
I plan to send you a little bit more. Yeah, I plan to send you a little bit more Bitcoin probably tomorrow.
Well, thank you.
I wanted to give you one way to spend it is you can go to bitpay.com, which is a wallet, but it also has a debit card attached to it. So you can transfer your Bitcoin dollars with debit card and then go shopping. So that's my advice for tonight. And I'm glad you're taking a look at the Bitcoin, because I think it's the wave of the future. It's the anti-banking system.
Well, we definitely need to have some kind of medium of exchange for when the private central bank collapses, because they do. It has happened before, where a central bank will collapse, and all of a sudden people are walking around with pieces of paper and metal slugs that are worth absolutely nothing. And the sooner they can get an alternative medium of exchange up and running, the less severe the damage will be.
Yes, and if you want to hear a little entertainment, there's a Bitcoin song called Ode, O-D-E, to Satoshi, who's the founder of it. And it's a great little country western song, I think. And Claire would probably love it, too.
I'll hunt it down and play it for her.
Yeah, she'll love it. It's only 3.5 minutes, I think. But yeah, do that, and it'll give her a little boost, I think.
Okay, well, thank you.
You have a great night. I hope you and Claire get better. And I know you're better, but I hope Claire gets better.
Yeah, I hope she gets better, too. She's having a miserable time, and she doesn't deserve it. All right, well, thank you very much. We're going to let you go, and we're coming up here on our final commercial break. I've been talking about how Donald Trump, because he has alienated the base that propelled him into office last year, that he may actually face opposition in 2020 from within his own party. And now we're getting word that Senator Jeff Flake is refusing to rule out a primary run against Donald Trump in 2020. So, Donald, you've got 3 years to make good on a lot of what you promised those of us who supported you. Or you're going to be a single-term president, I fear. Now, apparently there was this Christmas Day accident in Moscow where a commuter bus literally crashed into an underground passage in Moscow, and it killed several pedestrians, and everybody was out there saying, oh, it was terror this, terror this, terror that. But apparently the driver was hospitalized with a brain hemorrhage, and his condition is so bad, they've stopped interviewing. But basically he is saying, the driver says that the controls on the bus stopped working. That the bus started moving uncontrollably and the brakes stopped working. So I wonder how computerized that bus may have been, and if in fact it was subject to some kind of hacking, because we know that's possible with some of these newer systems. Okay, we're coming up here on our last commercial break here, and I'm going to dash down and check on Claire and make sure she's doing okay, and then we'll do the last segment of our program. Okay. Let's see. Jerry Brown actually pardoned 2 criminal aliens to keep them from being deported. I mean, this immigration thing is out of control. All right, we're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Last segment of our program on this Boxing Day here. And apparently there's been another strange incident in the skies over Crimea. Huge sounds of explosions rattling the windows, and apparently somebody got the trail on the photo. And I can imagine everybody's very nervous about fighter aircraft or bombers. I would say that it's possible we've had another really large meteor come on down. And if it feels like we're getting more and more of these large meteors, that can be attributed to one of 2 causes. The first is the global video coverage is intense. There's hardly any part of the globe that is not being recorded on somebody's security camera, and that makes it easier to get videos of these things happening and send them viral around the world. But there could be something else going on as well. It is known that our solar system, as it orbits around inside the Milky Way galaxy, it actually bobs up and down a little bit. And when it's at the top of the bob or the bottom of the bob, it's pretty much isolated there in space, not a lot of debris around. But when it's going through that central plane, the midpoint, there's a lot more debris, nearby objects that can distort the Oort cloud and send more comets and meteors in toward the central solar system. Now, again, the odds of you actually getting hit by one of these is remote, extremely remote. But they are fun to watch up in the sky as these things do come about. Obviously, we won't be doing that today with the weather that we're under right now. Now, getting on back to human-caused global warming, there's been a new study that came on out and basically said cosmic rays have 7 times the effect on climate as human beings. Now, we know the overall control of temperature and climate here on Earth is the sun, which appears to be going into a repeat of the Maunder minimum, and that means cooler weather. We also know that cosmic rays are more readily able to reach the lower atmosphere during periods when the sun is quieter. And cosmic rays will stimulate cloud formation. Now, clouds are white. They have a very high albedo, and that means they're reflecting more of that sunlight back out into space. And so the clouds and cosmic rays are actually amplifying the degree of cooling caused by a decline in solar output. And so this is going to be a factor. What's really interesting is CERN did research confirming cosmic rays stimulate cloud formation. And when it was published, they deleted the comments about how this applied to the theory of human-caused global warming. We have way too much politics dictating our science. Way too much. And it really has to stop, because science is either science or it's something else. And that something else is propaganda. It's another hoax a fraud in a white laboratory coat to convince you you should just believe what you're told to believe, that humans are warming the earth. And we already know there's been a huge amount of fraud in the global warming movement. The ClimateGate leaks from the Hadley Climate Research Unit, internal emails, and the actual computer code. Anyway, there's the music. Time for me to get on out of here and do Jim Goddard up in Vancouver. Please stay tuned for John Stedmiller's program. He's got a lot of interesting stuff to share with you. And we'll be back tomorrow here on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Aloha, America.